Hi, everyone. I'm Mike Murata. I'm the Global VP here at Acterys, and I will be your guide for like the next 45 minutes. The cool part about today, I'm joined with two people who didn't just think about this problem, they had to solve it. So Melissa Howitson is our CFO at Vena, which means she owns the numbers we're going to spend the next 45 minutes talking about. And we also have Hugh Cumming, CTO of Vena, who owns the systems generating it. So between the two of them, they've already had, the conversation a lot of you are about to have at your organizations. So here's the plan, everybody. 4 stops. First, why AI becomes a planning problem rather than a usage problem. Why that shift caught almost everyone off guard in the industry, right? Second, a simple 3-stage model so you can place yourself in it. Third, and this is the bulk of our time here today, I'll be hopping out of slides entirely and we'll kind of show you the working live inside of Power BI. There's a lot in this application, right? So I'm really going to focus in on 4 main concepts and screens because 4 is more than enough to bring this entire thing to life for all of you in the audience today. Finally, what a first step looks like on your own data, right? Which is a much smaller step than most people actually expect when it comes to managing and planning consumption costs and token usage and things like that. So rather than have me tell you about it, let's hear from somebody who actually had to sign off on it. Melissa, if you don't mind, maybe I'll pass things over to you. You can do a quick intro and we can start to learn more about what you're seeing in the industry today.
Sounds good. Thanks, Mike. So I'm Melissa Howitson, CFO here at Vena. And so I certainly sit in your shoes. And I just want to start talking here about why the conversation we're having today is becoming so important and seemingly so quickly. AI spend is probably one of the fastest growing expense categories that most organizations never planned for. Last year, about a third of FinOps teams said that they were managing AI spend. And you can see here that this year, it's basically all of them now. That's a line item that went from someone else's problem to our problem in finance in the span of just 12 short months, without a budget, without an owner, and without a forecast. Axios reported earlier this year on a single company that ran up a $500 million bill in 1 month on AI. And Forbes reported that Uber went through its full year AI budget in about 4 months. Now, these are obviously headline grabbing numbers, but I don't think the message is that companies just need to spend less on AI because, as you're probably experiencing like me, it's quite the opposite. Organizations want us to invest, and because they see enormous value in AI, the issue is that these economics are moving much faster than the planning and governance that any of us have as a process around it. And that's what finance leaders need to be paying attention to. AI can go from experimentation, where these dollars are relatively small, to suddenly enterprise-wide adoption, and they get big really fast. So suddenly you've got lots of users, lots of models, and lots of different consumption patterns. And the problem is right now, you're often discovering this cost after the fact. So the question becomes, how do we get ahead of that? And that brings us to the fundamental shift that we're seeing. A couple of years ago, most conversations were about AI adoption. Are we going to use AI? Where can we use it? I think we're moving past that now, and AI adoption is here. It's happening. Now the harder question is, what are the economics of this? Because this doesn't behave like traditional software where you sign a contract, you generally know how many seats you have, what the bill is going to be, and you can budget it with a lot of confidence. AI is very different. It's consumption-based. It's metered, and usage can change based on the way you're using it, the modeling that you're doing, how many users you have. And even the way that people are interacting with the AI can impact that. In that sense, for those who went through the transition from on-prem to cloud, it can feel a lot like that, where suddenly you're into a world of unknown, what is this cost going to be? But we learned something from that experience. It's very difficult to manage a variable consumption cost if the primary control mechanism is looking at the invoice after the consumption has already happened. So we need to get away from just saying, okay, what did we just spend, to asking, what are we likely to spend? What are the drivers of consumption? And what's the value we're getting from the money that we're spending? And this is where I think AI becomes a finance leadership issue. The AI spend is real. It's coming back into our budgets. For many organizations, it wasn't contemplated when those budgets were originally set. And so from a CFO perspective, I think there's three things that really matter here. The first is AI spend needs to become part of our planning process. We need to be able to forecast consumption rather than simply report on it after the fact. We need to know if this increases by 20%, what's that going to mean to our forecast? And those are the planning questions we need to start asking. Secondly, we need ownership and accountability. As AI spreads across the organization, who actually owns the spend? Whose budget are you going to be putting it into? Is it IT because they provide the technology? Is it finance? Is it the people ultimately consuming and therefore should be benefiting from it? These are all things you need to ask yourself. There's not a universal answer, but you need to think about how you're going to manage that. And third, and probably most importantly, we need to connect the cost to the value. The objective here as finance people shouldn't be how do we minimize the spend, but it should be us asking ourselves, hey, if I spend another $1 million, could I generate another $5-10 million of measurable business impact? Because that's a very good investment and we should be encouraging it. But we actually have to figure out how do we find those relationships. And that's why visibility alone isn't quite enough. A dashboard is a great starting point. It tells me what happened, can tell me that this department is consuming X amount of tokens. They spent this much last month. But that doesn't yet help me figure out how to forecast what's coming next, establish the accountability for the spend, and start to make a better decision. What finance ultimately needs is the ability to move from reporting on the consumption of AI to actively managing and planning for it. And that requires that finance and technology work together. Finance brings the planning, the accountability, the value lens. Technology understands how this consumption is working, the architecture, the usage patterns. And when those two perspectives come together, that's when AI can stop just being an invoice that you're trying to explain after the fact and start becoming an investment that you're actively managing for your business. Now I'm going to pass it over to Hugh, who's going to talk about why this is hard to govern and how this partnership between finance and technology becomes crucial. Hugh?
Thanks, Melissa, and thanks everyone for joining us today on this pretty important topic. One of the things I want to just pick up on what Melissa said is why is this hard to govern? Why is it hard to forecast? And I think, unlike other technology waves where organizations rush to implement SaaS solutions, the way in which organizations licensed them was by user. This group of users would have this access to this software, and that created a kind of control. It created a kind of forecast. Of course, there's always requests for people to have access to different tools. The challenge with AI is you have to spread it out widely across the organization. And then when you look at the work that's being done at the end of the month, you can end up with some unpleasant surprises. So the answer is that a monthly retrospective review on token consumption is insufficient. And I think, part of it is just creating the structure within the organization to be able to keep track of real-time usage that's happening and be able to bring that information back into your financial workflows so that you can start generating a forecast. I think the second dimension of it is around making sure that people are using the right tool for the right job. So there's lots of different models, versions of models, lots of different solutions. There's lots of different wrappers, and it's very easy to let sprawl take over your organization, AI sprawl take over your organization. And we're not here to really talk about the risk that creates, but from a pure financial management perspective, it is one way that costs can get out of hand is that people are potentially overusing the most expensive models. They're using tools that can solve the problem, but can be very expensive. I had a colleague who was super excited about this amazing presentation they did in this analysis leveraging Claude. It just happened to cost $8,000 to produce a PowerPoint. And, the point is that you don't want to stop people from doing that, But what is the mechanism in place that allows us to make sure that that doesn't become normalized? Because if everyone's PowerPoint deck becomes $8,000, even for the completely benign purpose of communicating ideas, which is what organizations use PowerPoint to, you could suddenly end up, for 100 people times $8,000 with a big number staring at you. And I think that's what we're trying to avoid. So I think the idea that you need visibility into usage, ownership, you have to work as a partnership with finance, between finance and IT, to be able to manage and control which tools parts of the organization have access to, and then create the pipelines and the piping to create these real-time views. And that's really what we're here to talk about, is what that looks like and how you can use real-time information to be able to update your plan and forecast and get your arms around the spend without it becoming an out-of-control spend category, and without it feeling like it's a heavy-handed approach and we're stopping innovation. Because I think the belief still is that innovation has to happen across the organization for the use cases to surface to the top to drive the change that people are trying to get to with the investments they're making in AI. And AI is, it's a relatively new line item on the metered bill. So most organizations now have a portion, or at least a significant portion, of the technology and computing power. They subscribe to it in cloud. A decade and a half ago, this was, a mix of server closets and different rooms that had, different types of technology in it. Most organizations are long past that. There's still obviously organizations that still run their own data centers, but for the most part, organizations that aren't the largest ones in the world tend to be very reliant on cloud for their computing. And there's lots of good reasons for that. I think to Melissa's earlier point, when it first showed up, it was hard to understand, how to constrain the spend. I think organizations have become mature and experienced, but also the real-time insights and visibility and a whole industry around being able to control and contain those costs has showed up. And it's all very nascent now for AI platforms. The dollar spend is meaningfully large. And I think, there's probably two ways to think about it. One is, how do we ensure that the deployment of AI and the tooling surrounding it is touching the people who can benefit from it the most. And the second is, how much money can we spend on this? What is the actual return that we're thinking should be attached to this amount of material spend? I think, within our organization, we keep going back and reforecasting what we're going to spend on AI. It's become part of how we do work every day. But it is a material spend that we, like many other organizations, have had to make room for. And I think that the art piece of it is just trying to forecast that spend, make room for that spend, and then calculate out what those benefits start looking like. And part of what is our hypothesis or thesis, I guess, and today is that reporting and dashboarding that you get out of the box that potentially comes monthly, or is potentially rolled up as an invoice into your existing financial workflows, is not sufficient based on the way charges can get out of hand so quickly. So being able to forecast and allocate these expenses faster, more reliably, helps you get, as an organization, out in front of this spend that can happen very quickly. My example of my colleague with their PowerPoint deck, that was just a day and a half. And suddenly their $250 budget was $8,000. And, and that's part of what we're getting at, is that these expenses just show up. And when you look at the invoice, it'll be very hard to, through that process, decide, how it was allocated, whether it was good spend or bad. But when it's tied directly into your financial plan, allocated directly to the individuals and departments, you can start getting a picture about how it's impacting and influencing the overall shape of the business through the lens of the financial plan. So with that, I'll hand it over to Mike, and he'll talk through how we see this happening with Acterys.
Great. Thanks, you. Really appreciate it. And great insight from both of you guys. You guys are on the front line dealing with the stuff day in and day out, which is always great. So one thing I want to kind of talk about here before we get into the fun stuff and dive into into the product and showcasing what, the four pillars that we kind of want to focus on today, right? Which are going to be transparency, right? That, was important with what Melissa said, AI efficiency and value creation, which you touched on, and Melissa also touched on the value, right? And then also being able to plan effectively and put things into action. So where are you guys today, right? The people that have joined us here. Typically, most people that we have been speaking to are, kind of sitting in stage one, right? So you have dashboards, show what was spent, right? This is where, most teams stop. And I want to be careful here, right? Stage one in itself is a real achievement, right? 2 years ago, most people couldn't even tell what their AI spend was at all, right? Or their consumption spend, but it's not the finish line, right? Because seeing it doesn't change it. Stage two, right? Plan it. Write back capabilities, turn the reports into a plan, model what a change is worth, commit it and forecast forward instead of explaining backwards. Stage three is where an organization can own it, right? Allocate the spend, charge it back to the team that drove it. That's the one that actually changes behavior, right? Because the moment a department sees its own AI line in their budget, efficiency stops being a central initiative, right? And all of a sudden it's part of their self-interest. So here's where most organizations that we speak to are, right? Stage one, some of you are edging into two, but almost nobody we've been talking to is really at stage three yet. So the demo that we want to walk you through, guys, today is going to be a climb from one phase all the way through to phase three. Watch it as a sequence, right? Not a set of screens here. So what are you about to see? Right. So what we're going to be taking a look at is a control tower for AI token and consumption management. We're going to be able to monitor the spend, name the waste, right? And again, not we're spending a lot, but a specific number attached to specific work that we can price. We want to watch a decision bend the forecast, right? And make an actual change going forward. We want to model and commit a plan live. And we want to approve and govern the write back. So decision is permanent, audited, and people are actually assigned tasks on what they need to do. All right. So let me share my screen here in a second. So after everything we've heard so far, right, from Melissa and from Hugh, finance can't forecast it. IT may be struggling to govern it by hand, right? That's two seats at the table, and neither one can kind of fix it alone. So what I want to do here is kind of show you what it looks like when both of those get solved in the same place. Before I start clicking around on our application, one thing I like to call out, what you are about to see today, everybody, is a calibrated model, right, of a 2,000 employee enterprise. This is not Vena's. This is not Acterys' data. This is not live on one of our customers' tenant. The numbers are internally consistent, right? So they can behave like real telemetry, but nobody's actual invoice is popping up on our screen today, all right? Your company's data will be able to drop directly into this model, and you guys can almost instantaneously start to take advantage of what you're seeing here inside the solution itself. So without further ado, let me see where we're at here. All right. So as you can see, everybody, inside of Power BI right now, we are inside of our AI control tower and spending application. Now, there's a lot of stuff in here. We don't have enough time today to kind of go through all of this, right? So as you can see across the top, we have different modules and screens for all areas of your business. So whether you want to look at token economics, right, prompt intelligence, data protection, all the way through to, hey, I have a bunch of unmapped expenses that I need to charge back to an individual or a business unit, right? I want to see capacity, savings. I want to see where we are from a people training perspective, right? So these are all different areas that this application will bring to life from both a reporting and from an action perspective. So what I want to focus on, guys, we're going to open up about only 4 or 5 screens today. as I mentioned before, transparency, efficiency, value, and then also having the ability to simulate and plan, right? So let's dive into our first pillar, which is going to be transparency. One number to start off from what you see on your screen here is I'll take your eye over to the left on an AI efficiency score. All right. 72 out of 100. So this is an efficiency score across every prompt that this organization has run in the last month. And it exists because our gateway classifies each one before it runs. 61% went to the right tier, right? 31% ran hot, 8% ran under, which is its own risk. That's a quality shortfall, right? Not savings. That 31% is frontier models doing some, summarization work, a small, fast model from the same vendor, right? At about 1 or 1.5% quality cost. Annualized, that could open up to 1.4 million in recoverable overspend. And that isn't an estimate, it's computed cell by cell from what the recommended tier would have cost to do the same exact work. All right. And, we know fixing it works because some of it already has. You can see here, realized savings of $45,000 a month realized out of an identified pipeline of 2.2 million. 8 migrations, right, are planned. We've already realized 4 of them. So here's why. Premium tokens are 48% of spend against the 30% target. That red bar right up here, okay, is showing the entire problem. Cheap tokens should be at 35% of the mix. They're at 15. That gap is the opportunity for this organization. And to be clear, everybody, as Melissa said, this is an efficiency story. This is not an AI or cost-cutting story. Every 1,000 tokens cost about a half cents and return 17. Nobody here is saying we want less AI, right? So everything so far that you see here on your screen shows you, right, what a dashboard can do. But here's what a dashboard can't do, right? So if we take a look down here, everybody, you see tier migration managed status. This isn't a screenshot of a problem, right? It's a live queue. So the decision, what we can do here is come down and see these different decisions and items that are pending, what we plan to put into practice, and we can have status updates, right? So based on a meeting, we came up with a different type of change that we can make to how we are using AI today. And once I come in and select approved from the dropdown, okay, press save changes, that decision just wrote back to the governed database. My identity, a timestamp, a full audit trail directly from inside this report. That action now, that migration plan has an owner, a target date, and it moves through delivery gates until the savings are realized. A decision without an owner and a date can't be saved here at all. All right. So that's transparency. There's a lot of different options here. We have different types of things that you can see, but this is seeing the waste and being able to act on it on the same place. The obvious question is, how do you do that at scale, right, Mike, across millions of prompts without a human in the middle of every one? So with that being said, let's dive into our second pillar, which is, kind of where Hugh's seat comes in, and that is going to be efficiency. So in this example, what we've done here is you can see that we have a ton of different metrics across the top of our screen, core KPIs, things that matter to someone like a CTO or an IT leader. 97% of prompts are routed automatically. The other 3% are advisory. The system recommends, the user decides. And the number it actually watch is the escalation rate. All right. 3.3%, right? Do you guys see right here? That's how often a cheaper model missed the quality bar and the task rerun 1 tier up, right? So tried something, wasn't good enough, changed my model, and went a tier up. 40 policy violations that were blocked or rerouted, right? That's not 40 failures. That's 40 times the guardrail did its actual job. So if we see down here, the model quality, all right, every model in its state, right, is auto-evaluated against a governed quality floor. Frontier models score 0.95, right? And you can see here versus their threshold of 0.90. The mid-tier models clear 0.85, right? The private cluster clears is a bar at, 0.84. And then there's this one, small open sourced model, right? Hosted scoring 0.79 against a 0.82 floor. Below, you can see right now the status is reviewed, right? We had that flag for review. Nobody had to notice that. The system, based on thresholds and systematic rules that we have in place, stopped routing new work here. All right, so again, routing things automatically with a floor and a threshold that holds, it brings the question your finance team asks about every line of this, right? What did we get for that? So that takes us to our value creation pillar that we've talked about earlier as well. So value creation, right, is going to be, let me pull this up for us. As you can see, value creation is next up. So here, right, you see 13 million in gross value month to date, 11.1, right, 116 is net after the AI cost itself. 77,000 hours saved, 2.3 million in revenue influenced by AI assisted opportunities. And the one I put in front of a board, right, 4.5 days. That blended payback, all tiers, right, across 24 working days, the spend pays for itself in the first week of the month. If we take a look here at our tier columns, right, you can see that at this column, you notice the run backwards from what you would expect. Cheap tokens, right, are returning 7.4 times. Medium tokens are returning 6 times 6.3, and premium and frontier models 5.3. The cheapest tier has the best return, and the most expensive tier has the worst. Which does not mean move everything cheap, because if we look at the middle of our columns here, right, you can see premium is doing something the others two aren't. Right? We have 1.7 million in value. Right, in revenue influenced, nearly $1 million in cost avoided on legal risk work and complex agent builds. Nobody's saving money by asking a small model to review an acquisition. The point isn't cheapest wins, it's that both tiers earn their place. And until you can see it per tier, you're simply guessing. Okay? And it resolves all the way down. So you can see down here, everybody, ROI by department and usage. Right? Legal returns 11.5 times and have given $26,000 of value per employee. Engineering, we're looking at 8.2 times ROI, right? And 13,000 hours saved. Customer support, we're only seeing 3.5. And that's the one that I would go look at, right? Not to go cut it, but to find out how they're using it, why they're using it, and see what we can do. So now we can see it, we can route it, we can prove what it returns, right? And the last screen that I want to show you guys is how we turn all of that into next year's number. So if I click our scenario model or aspect of things here, you can see 4 levers. So over here in our waterfall chart team, we have what the organization spends annually if no one changes anything. That's our unmanaged bar here. Each bar to the right is going to be one decision, right? A route classification to a private cluster, reduce premium and marketing, move summarization down a tier, shift coding assistance to a mid-tier, and on the right, you'll see what's left. Roughly a 17% reduction, right? And not one of those levers is use less AI, to be clear, right? Now, the coolest part about this application that our customers are falling in love with is having the ability to do assumptions real time, live on a model. Okay, so in this example, everybody over here, you can see we have a couple different levers. All right, and inside of Power BI now, I can now move something like summarization from 30% to 60%. Okay, and when I do that, you will see that my entire report automatically updates. No save button, no refresh, no ticket to IT, right? And this isn't a preview, everybody. This is writing to a governed backend data model. It's versioned. There's audit logs. It's attributed to me as an end user who signed in. In Excel, you guys know what this would be, right? It's a what if you email around and lose by Thursday. Here, it's a plan with an actual name on it. All right. So again, you can maneuver and manipulate certain drivers. So I can move this back to the 30% that it was supposed to be, right? Because everybody, governance works in both directions, right? Every one of these moves I'm making is on the record. It's in an audit trail. So you can do all of these different things, see the effect of something. Down the bottom, you can see all of our drivers, right? So in this screen down here, you see all of our different drivers. And based on assumptions and changes that I make up here, you will see the effect of those down here in those KPIs. All right, drivers in one column, my what if in another. You can always see what's changed. And the coolest part, team, you can have multiple scenarios. So we can have conservative, balanced, aggressive, right? All those different things with its own set of levers so executives can review. As an example right here, everybody, balance is currently sitting with CFO, right? We presented this to Melissa in a meeting, but we're waiting for approval. So let's assume Melissa comes in and wants to approve this, right? She can now come in and approve this entire scenario that they want actioned. Now, the coolest part about this, right, is that each owner now has a target date, right? It's created an approval itself. It executes like route doc classification to private open weight and 100%. The scenario didn't just get blessed, it became a work plan. And to showcase what I mean, if I come here to action register, you will see that based on an approval by Melissa or the CFO of your organization, we have now completed and built via workflow an entire actionable next step. So if you guys can see right here down the bottom, based on the approval that Melissa made, we have now assigned tasks to an individual owner on our team. That owner, when they log in, will see the tasks that have been assigned to them. They can make adjustments. They can also update their own statuses, right? To let you know that something's in progress, not started, or, right, something is under security view right now. And now leadership can have their own view and be able to see everything in their own way. So what we saw, guys, was the waste and named it. We watched it get routed automatically against quality floors and settings and things that hold. We proved what it returns per tier by department. And then we modeled next year, committed it, approved it, and watched it turn itself into a work plan with owners and dates. Okay? So the beauty about this, guys, none of that needed some net new platform, right? Or some massive data warehouse project. It's Power BI with planning and write back directly built in. And it doesn't much care whether the line is AI or Azure or Fabric capacity or Databricks or Snowflake spend. It's a consumption plan at the end of the day. But AI is what's most urgent and hitting, the bottom line for many organizations today. So with that further ado, I'd like to maybe hand things over to Irina. I don't know if we have any questions for myself, Hugh, or Melissa, but now would be a great time to take those.
Great. Thanks so much, Mike. Really good presentation from all of you. Thank you to Hugh. Thank you to Melissa. Thank you to Mike. We do have a couple of questions that came in. One in particular is, interestingly enough, what is a token and how does that play in? So with regard to AI token cost and AI token optimization, more of an explanation around how the token plays into, it seems. wants to take that one?
Do you want me to take it, and then happy to
Yeah.
at anyone else? So how many people have been to the arcade where you have to go to a machine and you get those tokens? You get a bag of tokens, and when you go up to different machines, of course, like the game that you're going to play, it tells you how many tokens it needs for each run. So, tokens is the currency that AI uses in order to give you responses. And the responses are broken down in two ways. One is something called inference. And inference is the cost in tokens to understand what you're saying. And generation is the cost in tokens to create the output. It's a little bit abstract, and the more sophisticated you are, you can understand if the inference requires the highest level model, because the higher the level of the model is, so you've all seen Fable 5, the higher the cost per token, but the more able it is to actually solve more challenging questions. So that's what tokens are. So because they're sort of abstract, and you don't know how many tokens you're going to burn, and you don't know whether the lower cost model is going to give you the answer until you actually go ahead and do that. And that's why this spend visibility becomes so important. Happy to open it up and let others chime in.
Great. Hugh, that was fantastic. Super helpful. Okay, it looks like we have another question. This one seems more in line with, well, it might be both, but definitely Melissa initially, might bring Hugh in as well. So I'll bring you both on. And the question was posed, how are you thinking about who should actually own the AI budgets? Is this a finance budget, an IT budget, or do you push it down to the individual business units?
So that one is a great question. It's funny because as you're out there trying to get your company to adopt AI, inevitably people are looking for, well, where's this going to come from? Because it's met with a bit of skepticism about, I'm not going to pay for something that I don't really know if it's going to give me value. So what we did, I tend to always start from the place that there is no magical tree in finance. There isn't some big finance budget. In fact, finance is usually one of the smallest budgets at the end of the day, because it's all the rest of the parts of the business that are spending money. And so the way that we handled it, and I would do this again, is the first tool that we decided to get for everybody, we did put it in the IT budget. It was small enough. We said, hey, we're going to try this. We're going to put it here, and we're going to let people use it. What we found after that is quickly more and more demands start piling up. And so we worked closely between our finance and our IT team to keep our arms around, okay, what are the asks that are coming in? Which are the tools? As we then agree to allow those tools into our environment, then we started charging back to the teams and making it clear. And that felt very scary, because all of a sudden each department leader was worried about, well, how do I know if I can afford it in my budget? And our thing was, hey, you're going to do it and you're going to spend this money. And if it's good money, you're going to keep wanting to spend it because you are the beneficiary of what you're doing with your AI. Or you're going to decide that you don't want to give these tools to everybody, and then you're not going to be spending that money. And so we now have it where the business owns the budget, which is why a tool like what Mike's been showing is so critical, because not only do we in finance and IT want to know what are people doing, what's the cost, but we let the business see that and share that insight with the business so that they can also be partnering with us to say, okay, yeah, I think the payback is there. Let's open it up. Let's give more tokens. Let's increase the usage caps, because they're going to, at the end of the day, be the beneficiaries of what they're getting. If you contain it to finance and IT, those budgets are just usually so small that it doesn't let you really push the boundaries with what AI can do, and the payback can be quite significant. So I'm a big advocate for it being in the business, the respective business units that are using it.
What do you see companies getting wrong when they first try to control AI spend? This might be Melissa, both of you. Are they usually focused too much on cutting usage rather than optimizing it?
Yeah, it's again, based on the very nature of it, the two ways you can contain spending is, one is set caps. And then obviously that constrains usage. People bump up into their caps, but there is the good thing about the caps is it actually drives visibility and knowledge and awareness within the community. So when people bump up into their cap, it's a really great time to have a conversation to say, okay, what am I trying to do here? And is that valuable? And, does it make sense that I'm asking for more usage? So I think, organizations sometimes are a little bit leery of setting those caps so that people don't, aren't discouraged. But I think you can always look at it the other way, that they create the opportunity for the right conversations. Melissa?
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Hugh. And the other thing I would say here is that should we focus on cutting the usage, that sometimes comes from finance. I find we can be some of the worst offenders because we're afraid of this cost. We're afraid of the budgets and landing this plane, when we at the end of the year. But we cannot approach these conversations from that, because then we may be the very ones holding our business back from some serious business outcomes. And so I try to make sure that all my business partners also understand, obviously we have to be responsible. We're going to manage these budgets. We're going to work with the team. But that's why this partnership that we talked about earlier, it is critical. We can't just in finance see a number. IT sees usage. The business sees the value. It's coming together and understanding that whole picture that we can really help to optimize and show what the return is going to be on this spend. Sometimes it's not so much cut the usage, and some of the things that Mike showed in those dashboards, it's how are people using it? How do we then identify opportunities to go out and enable the team to understand how they could use it more wisely, more efficiently? And so, we certainly do things as our IT team sees what's happening with the cost and sees a topic that we might need to upgrade our workforce on. And then we'll go out and show them about, token usage, or why would you want to get a dedicated agent versus just like a free-for-all connectors. When we're opening up connectors, there's ways you can do it and spend a lot of money. There's ways that you can do it and spend less. And so where we see the need, then we would partner with the business, and IT will help come up with those ways so that they can still get done what they want to do, or at least make conscious decisions. I remember one where, the team showed us, this PowerPoint, if you just use the model versus the PowerPoint, if you're going to force a certain format, the difference was 10x for that PowerPoint. Okay, well, once you know that, then you can decide where you need the certain formatting versus where it's good enough if you don't need to perfect it. But until you learn how that's working, you don't even know some of those choices that you're making and how you're driving cost relative to the value. So the partnership to me is where I focus, rather than just saying, we're going to cut it. Let's learn how to optimize this.
So that's the arc, right? We saw the spend and named, $118,000 worth of waste. We made a decision, right? We saw what it did to next quarter or next year's forecast. We modeled a plan. We committed it. We turned it itself into a work register, right? With owners and dates. And we ended on the question your finance team's going to ask first, right? Who pays for it? So you have the ability with this to kind of have that chargeback engine as well, which is extremely important. Now, that's exactly, what we want to kind of talk about next, right? Is what none of that required that new platform, right? Data warehouse project, what I mentioned at the end, right? Most of this things, right, that you're already running, all we need to do is add planning functionality and write it back on top of it. So if you guys are interested in learning more and you want to see maybe what something would look like at your organization, on your data, please feel free to book a working session with the Acterys team and the Vena organization. We'll be sending out emails after the fact, and we'll make sure that we have links there. You can also visit us through our website and book meetings directly from there, right? We're more than happy to build like a very simple prototype showcasing what this platform and this new application can do for you guys. And remember, today we talked about AI. We have a ton of customers already using this. Azure consumption, Databricks, Fabric capacity, right? Whatever one's hurting you guys the most right now, this is an application that can actually add value there as well, right? So the moment that stops being a calibrated model and starts being your actual spend, the conversation inside your organization changes completely, right? If we can show some basic actual information, right? Whether it be anonymized or not, and you guys can go and show that to your management team, things happen, and your bottom line will be better for it. So thank you very much for your time, everybody. Melissa, Hugh, so great to hear your expertise. You guys are on the other side of this, right? So rather than hearing from me about all these things as a vendor, hearing from you and your expertise was greatly appreciated. I'm sure everyone enjoyed that today.